I'm going to be demonstrating my method of the tubular cast on. You need a piece of waste yarn. I like it to be thicker than the yarn I'm using to cast on. And you want it to be about anywhere from 6 inches to a foot longer than the circumference or length of the stitches you're going to be casting on. So for the sweater, you're going to want it to be the circumference of the hemline plus about a foot. It just gives you lots of room to play with. So first off, make a slip knot at the end, and then I just leave that hanging. And then this is like a provisional cast on to a waste piece of yarn to start with. And I like to put markers I like to put them even numbered stitches apart, because when you're doing the setup rows, every other stitch is the same, and it helps you keep track if you're doing it correctly. So you hold the knot in your hand, and you hold the waste yarn above, and the yarn you're using it below. So then you just, I'm trying to get a good angle on this. You hold the needle parallel, then you drop it below, and you scoop up that piece of yarn, and then you bring it over the top, and you scoop there. So now you've got 2 stitches cast on, 3, and I kind of twist my wrist, 4. So I'm going to cast on 12 to show you, so I'm going to put a marker here. So you're holding it, your needle parallel to the waste yarn, then you go behind the yarn, pull it, and grab a hold of the yarn that you're knitting with, and you pull it up. Then you go in front of the waste yarn and scoop up that. So that's 2 more. You go behind and underneath the yarn and pull it up in front. And then you go between the yarn and the waste yarn. So now that's 4. I'm going to put another stitch marker on. I normally put them 10 or 20 stitches apart, but because this is a short one, I'm just going to put them every 4 stitches. So you parallel, you go behind the yarn, both yarns, and then you come up between them, and you got one, and then you go in front of the yarn, in front of the waste yarn, between the 2 yarns, and then you pull up. So behind both of them, and then between them to come up, and then you go in front of the waste yarn but between it and pull it up that way. Okay, so behind both of them, and then come up between them, in front of the waste yarn but between your knitting yarn, and scoop it up, behind them, come under both, and then come up between them, and then in front of the waste yarn between the 2 yarns, and come around and pull it up. So now I've got 12 stitches on the needle. So to start with, you turn your work, and you want to kind of fold your waste yarn back, and then you're going to knit the first stitch. And coming back on the other setup, it's exactly the same, so I'll do that holding the yarn in my other hand so both people can see. Then you bring your yarn in front, and you slip that stitch with the yarn in front. Then you knit the next stitch. Then you bring your yarn in front and slip. Then you take your yarn back. So with this marker, I've got a slip stitch. So then I'm going to knit this one, bring my yarn in front, slip this, bring my yarn back, knit, yarn forward, slip, yarn back, slip my marker, knit, yarn forward, slip, yarn back, knit, yarn forward, slip, yarn back, slip my marker, knit, yarn forward, slip, knit, yarn forward, slip. Now we're going to turn the work again. Oh, got a yarn barf there. Okay. Now this last stitch was slipped. So we're gonna, it's the same thing. Oh, I'm gonna hold the yarn the other side. So you're gonna knit that first stitch. And you're gonna bring your yarn forward. You're gonna slip this stitch. And you're gonna bring your yarn back. And you're gonna knit. And you're going to bring your yarn forward, and you're going to slip, kick your yarn back. So what we're doing is we're knitting every other stitch and slipping with the yarn in between. So these stitches that we're knitting now were slipped on the previous row. So, whoops, knit, yarn got caught on my marker a little bit, there we go. Okay, yarn forward, slip, yarn back, knit, 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 yarn forward, slip, and then you just have your yarn wrapped around the back. Okay, so now this is the first row. Those were the two setup rows, and this is the first row. So you just knit every stitch. So, and you can remove your markers now. Okay, now here comes the magic part. You just pull out your slip knot, make sure your stitches can't slide off, then you just pull this out. And you've got a beautiful cast on edge, tubular cast on edge. Now, here's one of the tricks I wanted to show you. The stitch markers are another trick because that helps you keep track of making sure you're slipping the stitches correctly. So, I always slip the first stitch in garter, so I'm just going to slip this stitch and knit to the end. But the first time you come on the second row to the very end, there's going to be a funky loop at the bottom. And so I'm going to show you how to deal with that. I'm not demonstrating how to knit holding the yarn in the other hand because I think you guys know how to do that, if that's the way you knit. Okay, so let's see if I can show this clearly. See, there's this funky loop right here. So you're gonna slip this stitch onto your right needle, the last stitch onto your right needle, and then you slip this loop. Let's see, yeah, slip that loop up, and then I put them both back on my left needle, and then I knit through the back loops. And then you don't have that funky little loop anymore. So that's the tubular cast on. It does work really good for ribbing, 1x1 ribbing. I like it for multiple reasons. I just think it's a really clean, fairly, let me get them off here, fairly flexible cast on. It stretches quite a bit. I hope this helps you.